case of Kelly Dwyer. Born in 1986 in Lincolnshire, a suburb of Chicago, Kelly Dwyer experienced a major turning point at 16 when her parents divorced. Although they remained supportive and close to her, the separation deeply affected her. The following year, she finished high school but felt uncertain about what direction to take next. Wanting more time before committing to college, she took a part-time job at a local restaurant. In 2008, at the age of 22, Kelly relocated to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, hoping for a fresh start. There, she enrolled in college, trained as a yoga instructor, and worked as a saleswoman to support herself financially. In addition to her other jobs, Kelly also worked as a nanny to supplement her income. She enjoyed exploring Milwaukee's trendy spots, making lasting memories around the city. When she met her father a month earlier, she was still living in Milwaukee and appeared to be doing well. By then, she had established herself as a successful yoga instructor and was a well-liked employee at a local sports store. Kelly seemed genuinely happy with her life. She enjoyed her work and had been in a year-long relationship with Chris Sacco, a 38-year-old IT manager at a transportation company. Chris earned his degree in international business from Boston University in 2009 and later relocated from New York City to Milwaukee for his job. Chris was known as a hard-working and respectable man from a good family, sharing Kelly's passion for sports and entertainment. The two appeared to have a strong relationship. He had established a successful career, owned a luxury apartment and an expensive car, and had accumulated considerable wealth on his own. Kelly's father approved of him, believing he was an ideal partner for his daughter. However, on October 12, 2013, Kelly failed to show up for work. Given her reputation for punctuality and dedication, her absence immediately raised concern. Her coworkers attempted to reach her, but her phone went unanswered, and she was inactive on social media. Something completely out of character for her. Kelly had never gone anywhere without her phone. As worry grew, her loved ones contacted authorities and filed a missing persons report. As investigators looked into Kelly's disappearance, they found no indication that she had enemies or anyone who might wish her harm. All of her personal belongings remained at home, leading police to dismiss the idea that she had left on her own. Even more alarming was the complete lack of activity on her bank account, phone, and other accounts. Fearing that she was in danger, authorities turned their attention to Chris Sacco, the last known person to see her on October 10, 2013. He was brought in for questioning and explained that he and Kelly had spent the evening at his apartment in Lafayette Towers before heading to a nearby bar, where they socialized and had drinks. According to Chris, they returned to his apartment around 2:30 a.m., spent the rest of the night together, and went to sleep. He claimed that Kelly left around 9 a.m., and that was the last time he saw her. Chris maintained that Kelly was not his girlfriend, describing their arrangement as an open relationship. He further disclosed that he was in love with another woman and envisioned a future with her. While investigators acknowledged that his account could be believable, they were troubled by certain inconsistencies in both his statements and behavior. To dig deeper, detectives spoke with friends who had spent time with Kelly and Chris the night before she disappeared. The friends confirmed that the group had enjoyed themselves at a bar before ordering pizza and eating it together on a bench outside. Kelly appeared cheerful that evening, even talking about her plans for the next day. Sleeping in, practicing yoga, catching up on laundry, and simply unwinding. Later, she and Chris returned to his apartment, where they were joined by another friend he had invited over for drinks. That friend later told investigators she felt uneasy inside the apartment, sensing tension between the two. She remembered Chris smoking and making small talk with her while Kelly seemed noticeably upset. Believing Kelly was simply tired, the friend didn't dwell on it and eventually left. But after speaking with more of Kelly's friends, detectives learned that Kelly and Chris Sacco had actually been experiencing problems in their relationship and were not on good terms. Kelly cared deeply for Chris, but it appeared that he did not feel the same level of commitment. He avoided making long-term plans with her, which left Kelly feeling anxious about their future. One of her friends suspected that Chris might be unfaithful and doubted the relationship would survive. Gradually, Kelly began to lose hope of building a future with Chris Sacco. Wanting a safety net in case things fell apart, she created a profile on a dating website and started messaging other men, though she had not met any of them in person. Her goal was simply to keep her options open if her relationship with Chris ultimately failed. Kelly's friends also began noticing bruises on her arms and neck. When they questioned her, she brushed off their concerns and minimized the situation. Although they feared the marks could indicate domestic abuse, Kelly never confirmed anything. At the same time, investigators reviewed security footage from Chris's apartment building. The video showed Kelly and Chris Zacco returning home intoxicated one night, but there was no footage of Kelly ever leaving the apartment afterward. This directly conflicted with Chris's statement that she had left at 9 a.m. the following morning. Authorities later learned that another friend of Chris had been at the apartment that night and admitted to taking illegal drugs with him. Detectives obtained a search warrant for Chris's apartment and found numerous drugs, pills, pipes, and other paraphernalia, leading to Chris's arrest for possession. They also discovered a torn shower curtain that appeared to have been forcefully removed. During questioning, Chris remained calm and admitted to using drugs but denied distributing them. A search of his cell phone revealed disturbing content, including photos of an unconscious girl in bed and a video of Chris raping the girl, who appeared to have been strangled. This led to suspicions that Chris had drugged and exploited her. Evidence from Chris's phone was linked to Kelly's disappearance. Police returned to Chris's apartment with a dog, which responded to the bed and bathroom area before leading them to the front door. The dog then guided police to Chris's car in the parking lot and to a nearby dumpster. The investigation reached a critical stage when investigators believed Kelly had been murdered. Kelly's boyfriend, Chris, became the prime suspect, as evidence suggested he was the last person to see her alive. It was believed that he spent time with Kelly in his apartment before secretly moving her body into his car, a plan that would have escaped the building's 28 surveillance cameras. During the investigation, police analyzed Chris's computer and discovered child pornography. This led to Chris being charged with possession of the images, but he was released on bail and was awaiting trial. The investigation continued as authorities attempted to find Kelly's body and gather enough evidence to build a stronger case against Chris. It should be noted that Chris had claimed to be in a long-term relationship with a woman, and investigators quickly began gathering information about that woman. The investigation uncovered the identity of a woman named Megan, with whom Chris had been secretly in a 3-year relationship, unbeknownst to Kelly, similar to the relationship he had with Kelly. Police came to interview Megan and showed her photos of Chris's apartment. After a thorough inspection, Megan found several items missing, including a shower curtain in the bathroom, a rug, several towels, and the large golf bag that was usually kept in the bedroom. Detectives believed Kelly could fit in the large bag Megan reported missing. After examining the building's entrances and exits, police found a side path that Chris could have taken to get to his car without being seen by surveillance cameras. Reviewing footage from the parking lot cameras, Chris was seen arriving at the house with the large bag, which he placed in the trunk of his car. At 10 a.m. on October 11th, Chris left the house in his car. Just 2 minutes later, at 10:08 a.m., Kelly's phone lost connection at the same location. Over the next 8 hours, footage captured Chris making multiple trips between his home and his car, loading up on belongings before leaving for good at 6:16 p.m. Chris did not return home until the next day. When investigators asked him what he had been doing the previous day, he said he was moving his summer sports gear to his mother's house. However, no one found this explanation credible. Chris was supposed to meet Megan at 7:30 that evening, but he arrived more than an hour late. Detectives suspected that he was looking for a place to dispose of Kelly's body, which would explain his delay. Unfortunately, they were unable to track his movements because his phone had been turned off since the morning. As an IT expert, Chris would have known that his phone records could be used to track him. Megan reported that Chris seemed very strange that night. He appeared restless and anxious, and he said that his phone was not working, which was why he was late. After the date, Megan and Chris went to Megan's apartment, where they spent the night. According to Megan, Chris was extremely stressed, had not slept at all, and was sweating so much that she had to change the sheets in the morning. Investigators believed that Chris was worried because he still had Kelly's body in the trunk of his car and was afraid of being discovered. He was trying to find a place to hide her body. On the morning of October 12th, Chris said goodbye to Megan and left after trying to convince her to temporarily move to Denver, but she refused. Police tracked Chris's location history using his car's GPS, which led them to a cheese shop called Cheese House, 80 miles from Milwaukee. However, it seemed unlikely that Chris would have driven that far just to buy cheese. Chris claimed that he had bought cheese for his parents, presenting a receipt for the cheese at 9:55 a.m. on October 12th, which his parents confirmed. However, the police found it difficult to believe Chris's story, as the same cheese could easily be purchased at a nearby supermarket. They suspected that Chris might have dumped Kelly's body in the area around the cheese store. Further investigation revealed that on his way back, Chris stopped at a sports store and bought new sneakers that afternoon. Detectives suspected that Chris had deliberately discarded his old shoes, possibly to avoid leaving blood or footprints that could be linked to the crime scene. It appeared that he had carefully planned to destroy evidence and create an alibi for himself. Chris, with his analytical mind, had tried to commit the perfect crime. However, investigators were able to spot inconsistencies in his story. Notably, it took him over 2 hours to travel from the cheese house to the sports store, a distance of about 80 kilometers, when it would normally take only an hour. This significant time difference suggested that Chris spent an additional hour on another activity, possibly hiding the body. Police speculated that he may have dumped the body along the way. However, the exact location of the body remained unknown. With a large search area spanning 50 miles, finding the body proved to be a huge challenge. A roadside search eventually led to a discovery. In a wooded area approximately 37 miles from the city, a local resident found human remains while walking. Upon discovery, the resident immediately contacted the sheriff's office. Dental records confirmed the remains were those of Kelly Dwyer. This discovery finally ended Kelly's parents' long and agonizing search for their daughter. The next step was to secure justice by determining the exact cause of her death. Based on available information, the medical examiner believed she may have been strangled but not forcefully enough to fracture the hyoid bone. There was no direct evidence at the scene where Kelly's body was discovered, such as torn curtains, mats, towels, or bags. However, the position of the skeleton provided valuable insight. The body was found face down, with one arm trapped underneath and the legs bent in a way that suggested it had been hidden for some time after death. This finding further supported the theory that Kelly's body had been hidden in a golf bag, as evidenced by footage of Chris holding the bag and driving into the area where the body was discovered. While these findings were compelling, they were circumstantial and did not directly implicate Chris in Kelly's murder. Ultimately, it took 5 years for Chris to be formally charged in connection with Kelly's disappearance. The charges against him were manslaughter and concealment of a body, as investigators lacked specific evidence to prove intent. Theorizing about the events of that night, detectives speculated that Chris and Kelly had become intimate, but Chris got carried away with strangulation, leading to Kelly's death. The investigation revealed that Chris then ripped off the shower curtain, removed the rug and towels, wrapped Kelly's body, placed it in a bag, thoroughly cleaned the house, and disposed of it. Throughout the ordeal, Chris maintained his innocence in Kelly's murder. Key evidence was presented at Chris's trial, including CCTV footage, cell phone video of the strangulation, and the search of his apartment by a dog. Megan, who testified against Chris, reported that he was extremely anxious on the day of the incident and was late for a meeting. Additionally, Chris's former girlfriends took the stand, expressing their concerns about his unhealthy obsession with strangulation and rough sex, which had frightened them. The defense countered that there was no direct evidence linking Chris to the crime and that the prosecution's case was based on speculation and conjecture. Chris had a clean record before the drug possession incident and was a successful IT professional with a stable job. The defense argued that Chris was incapable of murder. However, it was discovered that not all the CCTV footage had been saved, casting doubt on the prosecution's conclusion that Kelly had not left Chris's house. The defense presented a witness who claimed to have seen a girl resembling Kelly in another man's car the weekend after she went missing. Although the witness had previously seen Kelly on TV as a missing person, he was not 100% sure it was her. The defense offered an alternative explanation for Kelly's disappearance, suggesting that she may have left Chris's apartment safely but was later caught by one of her new boyfriends. The defense also questioned the reliability of the police dog during the investigation. Since the dog's reaction was not captured on video, its alert was based solely on the police officer's subjective interpretation. In response, the prosecution argued that the investigation using the sniffer dog was conducted objectively and transparently, with multiple police officers present and agreeing on the results. Ultimately, the prosecution convinced the jury that Chris was responsible for the murder. With no other obvious suspects, the prosecution argued that Chris had planned and executed the crime carefully, deliberately destroying evidence to cover his tracks. After lengthy deliberations, the jury found Chris guilty of first-degree manslaughter and concealing a body. The Kelly family and the prosecution had asked for the maximum sentence of 48 years, while the defense asked for a reduced sentence of 22 years. In December 2018, Chris Zacco, then 43, was sentenced to 31 years in prison, including 26 years for manslaughter and 5 years for concealing a body. In addition, Chris Zacco was sentenced to 19 years for possession of child pornography and possession of narcotics based on the outcome of his November 2014 trial. Chris Zacco is currently serving his sentence at the Green Bay Correctional Facility in Wisconsin. He will be eligible for parole in 2065, when he turns 93, essentially making his sentence a life sentence. Chris Zacco was unhappy with the sentence and attempted to appeal, but his appeal was rejected. The case of Rebecca Bleefnick. Rebecca and Tim, who met at Quincy University, were the epitome of a perfect couple. Rebecca was a biology major and a tennis player, while Tim was a star football player. 2 years after graduating, the practical couple decided to tie the knot. Instead of splurging on an engagement ring and a lavish honeymoon, they chose to save their money. Although Rebecca had a genuine interest in medicine and had dreamed of becoming a doctor, she decided to pursue motherhood instead. Her dream came true when she and Tim had 3 sons. Tim was known for his charisma and ability to entertain. In 2008, he auditioned for American Gladiators, making it to the final round. Years later, in 2019, he received an invitation from the producers of Family Feud to participate in the show with his family. Rebecca's nursing school commitments prevented her from joining Tim on the TV show Family Feud. Undeterred, Tim assembled a team of family members, including his parents and brothers. The show's format features 2 teams competing to guess the most popular responses to survey questions from 100 people. Despite being unprepared, Tim's team performed well, earning points and ranking second on the scoreboard. They went on to participate in 3 episodes, winning a total of $20,000, which was divided equally among the family members. However, Tim did not share any of the winnings with his wife, Rebecca. This decision highlights the strain on Tim and Rebecca's marriage, which began when Rebecca pursued a nursing career against Tim's wishes. Tim had expressed concerns about Rebecca's well-being and ability to manage stress, but Rebecca's friends believed Tim was opposed to her independence and autonomy. Rebecca's friends noticed that she was becoming increasingly unhappy in her marriage over time. At first, her marriage to Tim was relatively happy for about 5 years. But then Tim started to become more controlling and manipulative. Despite Rebecca's hard work in her nursing studies and job, Tim didn't pull his weight at home, leaving Rebecca to handle most of the responsibilities. Rebecca realized that their marriage was struggling and wanted to fix it, so she suggested that they go to marriage counseling together. She believed that counseling could help them find solutions and improve their relationship. However, Tim refused to go despite Rebecca's efforts to save their marriage. In January 2021, after 11 years of marriage, Tim suddenly filed for divorce, which caught Rebecca off guard. She had been committed to working through their issues, but Tim had already made up his mind. He moved out of their family home and into a new house across town, leaving Rebecca to pick up the pieces. Tim and Rebecca's divorce was extremely contentious. They were unable to agree on anything, and their communication broke down completely. The couple disputed several issues, including who would get custody of the children, how they would divide their property, and how much alimony one would pay the other. Things escalated to the point where Tim felt threatened and applied for a court order to protect himself from Rebecca, alleging that she was stalking and harassing him. Rebecca had a different view of the situation, accusing Tim of harassment. She shared her concerns with friends through text messages describing incidents where Tim yelled at her, pushed her in front of their sons, and threw things. Rebecca feared Tim might do something drastic to take her children away, which alarmed her sister, who knew Rebecca's fears were valid and that she needed help to protect herself. Rebecca then filed for an order of protection against him, claiming he entered her home without permission and lied about their interactions. However, the judge denied both Rebecca and Tim's requests, instead ordering them to stay away from each other's homes, except during child custody exchanges. In February 2023, Tim told the police he wouldn't return a gun, calling Rebecca a derogatory name. At the time, Rebecca and Tim's 3 sons, aged 12, 10, and 5, was staying with Tim at his home, just a mile from Rebecca's residence. Their divorce was set to be finalized in just 1 week. Tim contacted Rebecca's father the next day, worried because he couldn't reach Rebecca, and she had failed to pick up the boys from school as planned. Given Rebecca's dedication as a mother, her father suspected something was seriously wrong. Concerned for Rebecca's safety, her father rushed to her house. When he arrived, he entered the house calling out to Rebecca, but received no response. He went upstairs to her bedroom, where he found a disturbing scene. Rebecca lay on her back, covered in blood and gunshot wounds. After Rebecca's father discovered her body in the bathroom, detectives and forensic experts arrived at the house. They began by carefully examining the outside of the property, searching for clues. Their investigation revealed that the suspect had probably entered the house by forcing open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. The discovery led investigators to believe that the suspect used a patio chair to gain access to the house and climb up to the roof. By retracing the suspect's likely path, they went to Rebecca's bedroom, where they found the door had been violently kicked in or broken. The state of the door suggested to investigators that the suspect had forcibly entered the room, probably in search of Rebecca. Evidence indicated that Rebecca had tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect had pursued her and caught up. Ultimately, the suspect shot Rebecca inside the bathroom. During their search of the bathroom, where Rebecca's body was found, investigators stumbled upon her cell phone. Upon examining Rebecca's phone, investigators found a 911 call dialed at 1:11 a.m. This led them to form a theory about the events of that night. They believed that as the suspect chased Rebecca through the house, she tried to call for help, but accidentally dialed a wrong number before she could try calling 911 again. The misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. suggested to investigators that the suspect had knocked the phone out of Rebecca's hand. They believed Rebecca was likely killed around this time. However, when police questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them remembered hearing any noise around 1:11 a.m., which raised suspicions among the investigators. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not a botched burglary, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind significant evidence. One notable discovery was a partial shoe print found near the point where the suspect entered the house. The shoe print discovered at the crime scene could be crucial in identifying the type of shoe worn by the suspect, including its make and model, as well as providing details about the size and shape of their feet. The presence of 8.9mm shell casings and small pieces of shredded plastic near Rebecca's body also provide significant leads for the investigators. Despite collecting these key pieces of evidence, the investigators were unsure how to interpret their findings. To gain more insight, they decided to send the evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. Specifically, they wanted to determine if any of Rebecca's personal belongings matched the evidence found at the crime scene. The investigation began when Rebecca's father found her lifeless body in the bathroom of her home. Upon arriving at the scene, investigators carefully examined the exterior of the house, leading them to identify how the perpetrator gained entry by prying open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. Here's what likely happened. The suspect used a patio chair to climb up to the roof and entered the house. The investigators retraced the suspect's steps and found that the bedroom door had been violently kicked in or broken, suggesting the suspect had forced their way in, probably looking for Rebecca. It seems Rebecca tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect caught up with her. Unfortunately, the suspect shot and killed Rebecca in the bathroom. The investigators found Rebecca's phone near her body and examined it. They discovered that she had dialed 911, but mistakenly entered an extra digit, 91126, at 1:11 a.m. This discovery helped the investigators piece together the events. They believe Rebecca was desperately trying to call for help as the suspect chased her through the house, but she accidentally dialed the wrong number. Before she could try calling 911 again, the suspect likely knocked the phone out of her hand. The timing of the misdialed call, at 1:11 a.m., led investigators to believe that Rebecca's murder likely occurred around that time. However, when they questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them reported hearing any suspicious noises, which was surprising given the fact that she had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not the result of a burglary gone wrong, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind a significant amount of evidence. One crucial discovery was a partial shoe print near the point of entry, which could help identify the brand and model of the shoe, as well as the size and shape of the suspect's foot. The crime scene also yielded 8.9mm shell casings, and small pieces of shredded plastic were found scattered near Rebecca's body. After gathering all the evidence, the investigators were unsure what to make of their findings, so they decided to send the said evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. The detectives wanted to determine if any of the evidence found at the crime scene matched Rebecca's belongings. A neighbor had installed a security camera on the side of their house after their car was broken into a year earlier. The camera was directed towards the neighbor's driveway, which shared a boundary with Rebecca's home, and was set to turn on and alert the neighbor whenever it detected movement. Although the camera didn't capture anything significant on the night of Rebecca's death, it did record something unusual the previous day at 1:05 a.m. The footage showed a person walking down the driveway towards the back of Rebecca's house, a potentially crucial discovery in the case. About 48 minutes after the initial sighting, the same individual was seen walking in the opposite direction. Interestingly, Rebecca's neighbor had captured a similar incident on their camera about a week prior, on February 14th. After reviewing their security footage, Rebecca's neighbors noticed a suspicious dark-clad figure lurking around her house on Valentine's Day, prompting them to alert her immediately. Upon learning about the mysterious figure, Rebecca became increasingly paranoid. Although she claimed not to have seen anyone on her property, she had heard unsettling voices in her backyard the previous night, which frightened her. Based on the security camera footage, the police expanded their search to neighboring houses to gather more evidence of the dark-clad individual. Their search led them to a house near the Quinney bus barn, where they found footage of a person riding a bike, dressed in dark clothing, heading towards Rebecca's house. These videos confirmed the description of the mysterious person seen in the original driveway footage, providing a clear consistency in the suspect's appearance. After analyzing the recorded times of the videos, detectives suspected that the person on the bike was the same individual seen in Rebecca's driveway footage. Although Rebecca's neighbor's security camera didn't capture footage of the mysterious person on the night of her murder, officers found footage of someone on a bike riding towards Rebecca's house just before and after the incident. This person matched the description of the individual seen lurking in Rebecca's driveway in the days leading up to her murder. While the video evidence was helpful in the investigation, its poor quality limited the information it provided. The detectives couldn't identify the person in the video due to the grainy image, making it difficult to determine their gender. However, they did notice one distinctive feature. The bike had no reflectors on its wheels. When Rebecca's sister heard that she was murdered, only one person came to mind as a suspect: Rebecca's estranged husband, Tim. Rebecca's sister, who had a first-hand account of the contentious divorce between Rebecca and Tim, shared this information with the detectives working on her sister's case. The detectives suspected Tim of murdering Rebecca, especially since her murder happened just a week before their divorce was due to be finalized. During the investigation, they made a crucial discovery. A bike with no reflectors on its wheels, similar to the one seen on security footage, was found just a block from Tim's house. This discovery increased the suspicion surrounding Tim, leading the detectives to obtain a search warrant for his home. When the police executed the warrant, Tim cooperated fully, standing outside his home with the officers as they searched his belongings. On March 13, 2023, 2 weeks after Rebecca's murder, Tim was arrested and charged with her murder. When his mugshot was released, Rebecca's family and friends were shocked by his appearance, which was very different from the clean-cut man they had known. Tim's friends and family were shocked by his disheveled appearance, which they attributed to the emotional toll of his recent divorce. His once neat and tidy hair was now unkempt, and his clothes were messy. They speculated that the divorce had affected not only his physical appearance, but also his mental well-being. However, Tim had a surprising explanation for his changed look. He revealed that he was growing his hair out to support a charity campaign for cancer research. Despite this, a viral video clip showed Tim's appearance on Family Feud, where he made a bizarre statement about regretting his marriage, which took on a disturbing tone after he was arrested for murdering his wife. Many people believed that Tim's comment on Family Feud was a strange and unsettling prediction of what would eventually happen. They thought it showed that he had hidden feelings about his wife and was a sign that something bad was happening in their relationship. When the police looked into Tim's phone, they found that he had made a fake Facebook account under the name John Smith. During their investigation, they discovered that Tim had been searching for a specific type of bicycle on Facebook, a blue Schwinn bike with no reflectors on the wheels. This was an important discovery because it matched the description of a bike that was found abandoned just 1 block away from Tim's house. Despite having strong evidence against Tim, the detectives faced a significant obstacle when they arrested him. Tim was held in jail without the possibility of bail, but he requested a quick trial, which is his right under the law. Prosecutors were required to bring the matter to trial within 90 days of Tim's arrest. The prosecution faced a significant challenge in convincing a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Tim murdered Rebecca due to the absence of a confession or DNA evidence. Juries typically look for these 2 key elements in criminal cases. To prove Tim's guilt in the murder of his wife Rebecca, the prosecution faced a significant challenge. Exactly 3 months after Rebecca's tragic murder in her home, Tim's trial began on May 23, 2023. During the trial, the prosecution presented several key pieces of evidence found at the crime scene. One notable piece of evidence was the shredded plastic fragments discovered around Rebecca's body. The prosecution argued that these fragments came from an owl's grocery bag. Further investigation revealed that similar bags were found in Tim's house. The prosecution alleged that Tim used these bags as a makeshift silencer when he shot his estranged wife multiple times. They claimed that the bags were used to muffle the sound of the gunfire, preventing it from being heard by others. The prosecution also presented DNA evidence, suggesting that Tim left behind DNA while using the Aldi bags. An expert testified that it was highly likely Tim contributed to the DNA found, and that his DNA could not be ruled out as a match for the DNA found under Rebecca's fingernails. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting that a crowbar found in Tim's basement might have been used to force open the window at the victim's house on the night of the murder. Although an expert testified that there were microscopic similarities between the crowbar and the window's prime arc, she couldn't conclusively say that the crowbar was involved. To build a stronger case, the prosecution presented records of several searches made on Tim's phone, including how to open my door with a crowbar, how to make a homemade pistol silencer, how to clean gunpowder off your hands, and average police response time in Quinny. The prosecution's expert witness testified that she compared the shell casings found at the crime scene to those found at Tim's house during the investigation. Her analysis revealed that 27 of the casings from Tim's home were fired from the same 9mm weapon used to kill Rebecca. When investigators searched Tim's house, they didn't find Rebecca's 9mm gun, which he had refused to return to her. Tim claimed he hadn't seen the gun in months before Rebecca's murder. During the trial, the defense had the opportunity to call witnesses but chose not to. After the 6-day trial, the jury took 4 hours to reach a guilty verdict and Tim was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Despite claiming innocence and planning to appeal, Tim is behind bars, and Rebecca's family believes justice has been served. During the sentencing hearing, Rebecca's family read impact statements. One of her sisters addressed Tim, telling him how his actions affected his son's well-being. She stressed that his choices were causing his sons to suffer. Rebecca's sister vowed to keep her memory alive for her 3 sons, even after her passing. Case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Stern was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Stern. As their only child, Sarah received all their love and attention due to her mother's health issues, which made it impossible for her to have more children. Sarah grew up to be an outgoing, cheerful, and energetic kid. She was actively involved in school theater, photography, drawing, and sports, competing in swimming and softball. Her dream was to become an artist or designer, and she planned to attend a local college for arts. Tragedy struck in 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. This devastating loss sent Sarah into depression, but she tried to support her grieving father, Michael, with whom she lived. They found comfort in their dog, Buddy, whom Sarah adored. Sarah's life was finally taking a turn for the better. After graduating from college, she planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before that, she had always dreamed of traveling the world, with Canada being her top destination. She even considered living there for a while. Meanwhile, Michael Stern frequently traveled out of state for work, sometimes for weeks at a time. But he never worried about leaving his daughter Sarah alone at home, because she was a responsible and independent young adult, and their town was known for being quiet and safe. However, during one of Michael's business trips in December 2016, trouble arose. On the night of December 3rd, around 2:30 a.m., a taxi driver called the police station to report an abandoned car on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35. The area was deserted and rarely visited at night, making the empty vehicle immediately suspicious. The taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home over the old bridge, had stopped to check if anyone needed help when he saw the car parked by the side of the road. Finding the car empty and no one around, he called the police, suspecting that the driver might have abandoned their car to jump into the water below. A tragic but not uncommon occurrence at that spot. The police found an abandoned silver sedan on a bridge with the keys still in the ignition, but no signs of blood or struggle. They suspected that the owner might have gone there to commit suicide by jumping into the river. After checking the car's ownership, they found it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Stern, who lived in the same town. When the officers visited Lily, they found her alive and well. She told them that she hadn't driven for years, due to poor eyesight, and that her 19-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, used the car. Lily tried to call Sarah, but her phone was turned off. Lily then gave the officers her son's address, where Sarah lived, and mentioned that her father was away on a work trip. When the police went to the house, they found the back door open, which was concerning. After searching the house, they didn't find anything suspicious, except for a locked-in dog whining. In one of the bedrooms, the house was in order with no signs of struggle, blood, or evidence of an intruder. However, Sarah was nowhere to be found. Michael Stern rushed home on the first available flight after learning about the situation. When he arrived, the homeowner informed him that nothing was out of place or missing, including all of Sarah's personal belongings, such as her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, which she always carried with her. The police shared their initial theory with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the bridge intending to jump, and asked if he had noticed any signs of suicidal thoughts or self-harm attempts. Michael admitted that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but with support from family, friends, and her studies, she had recovered. She had ambitious plans for her future, including becoming a designer and traveling the world. Despite this, on the night of December 3rd, Sarah disappeared from her home, and her car was found abandoned on the bridge just hours later. These were the known facts, and the investigation now needed to focus on identifying who Sarah had been in contact with that day, what conversations she had, and who was the last person to see her. After Sarah Stern's disappearance, early witnesses came forward to reveal that she had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam had valuable information that could help solve the mysterious case. The police quickly decided to interview him to gather details and piece together what had happened that day. When the police arrived at Liam's house, they met his mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after working a night shift. At the officer's request, she woke Liam up, who seemed puzzled by the situation. Upon learning about Sarah's disappearance, Liam was shocked and confirmed that they had indeed spent the previous day together. He agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam and Sarah attended college together and decided to skip their last 2 lectures on Friday morning. After classes, they went back to her place where they spent the day playing video games, chatting, and discussing their future plans. They left her house twice, once to get food from a nearby fast food restaurant, and again to visit a local supermarket around 7 p.m. Liam then left Sarah's house to start his night shift at a 24-hour store and didn't see her again after that. When questioned about Sarah's mental state, Liam shared that she had been struggling with depression since her mother's death. She was torn between wanting to end her life or running away to start fresh. Liam also revealed that Sarah had difficulty communicating with her father and finding common ground with him. Although Liam didn't rule out the possibility that Sarah might have taken her own life, he mentioned that she had recently considered moving to Canada and had even exchanged some money for Canadian dollars. This was later confirmed when a small amount of Canadian currency was found in her bedside table drawer, although it wasn't enough to cover much. Preston Taylor, a close friend of Sarah's and her prom date, corroborated Liam's statement. He added that Sarah was struggling with depression and speculated that she might have either run away to Canada or jumped off the bridge. By the end of the conversation, Preston was overcome with emotion, expressing his deep affection for Sarah. The idea that Sarah had fled to Canada or elsewhere was quickly ruled out, as she didn't have her passport and couldn't have left the country. Investigators then focused on the possibility that Sarah might have jumped off the bridge, and a massive search effort was launched in the river. The strong current in the area complicated the search, as it could have carried a body far from the bridge. To aid in the search, divers were deployed, specialized equipment was used, and hundreds of volunteers, along with police, scoured the riverbanks for any signs of Sarah or her belongings. Liam and Preston were among the volunteers who actively helped search for Sarah. Unfortunately, the search efforts yielded nothing, and no sign of Sarah was found. As a result, the authorities decided to continue interviewing people who knew Sarah well, which led to the discovery of a strange inconsistency. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as being in great spirits, with none of them aware of any problems she had with her father. In fact, she often spoke about him in a warm and loving way. However, after she disappeared, her friends Liam and Preston seemingly took on the role of grieving relatives, garnering sympathy from many. But their behavior soon raised suspicions, as if they were acting for an audience. Despite only recently becoming close, the police decided to re-question Liam and Preston, noticing that their behavior was odd. During the re-questioning, Liam appeared deeply distressed when asked about his relationship with Sarah and Preston. Liam revealed that the 3 of them grew up together, attended the same school, and shared their deepest secrets and dreams. Preston had even taken Sarah to the prom, but their relationship was purely platonic. Liam considered Sarah like a sister, and they had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah trusted him completely and had confided in him about the large sum of money her mother had left her, which was mostly stored in a safety deposit box. Sarah supposedly distrusted her father, who she thought wanted the money for himself. So she kept it in the bank with plans to withdraw it later, to escape to Canada. However, Michael Stern disputed this story, providing a different account. According to Stern, his wife had been saving money for their daughter's future expenses, such as education, a wedding, or a home since Sarah's birth. They stored the cash at home in a shoebox, which contained old and worn bills that didn't seem significant at the time. After his wife's passing, Stern gave the box of money to Sarah, advising her to deposit the old and worn bills into the bank. Sarah followed his advice, putting some of the money in her checking account for daily expenses and renting a safety deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money to fund her university education and travel the world. Michael firmly denied any claim to the money for his own use. The discovery of the missing student's large sum of money led investigators to suspect that someone might have targeted her for financial gain. They decided to investigate her financial transactions, including her safety deposit box and bank records. The investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a substantial amount of money from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared. She also visited her bank to withdraw cash from her safety deposit box. The detectives were surprised to find that Sarah was not alone during her bank visit. Bank surveillance footage showed that Liam accompanied her. This raised new questions, as Liam had failed to mention this visit during previous questioning. When asked about it, Liam hesitated before explaining that Sarah trusted only him and had asked for his accompaniment because she was afraid to carry a large amount of cash home alone. His explanation seemed reasonable and his behavior appeared natural. A security camera at a house opposite the Stern residence captured footage of the street and neighboring yards. The footage showed that Liam stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. The silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. that night. About a month after Sarah's disappearance, an acquaintance named Anthony came to the police station with a disturbing story. Unaware of the events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. It turned out that Anthony had been classmates with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation pursued a passion for filmmaking, remaining in touch only with Liam, who shared his interest in cinema. About a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited Anthony and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a teenage horror movie. Liam came up with a plot where a girl tells a friend about a large sum of money she has, and the friend gains her trust before strangling her and dumping her body in a river. Anthony liked the idea, and they wrote a couple of pages of the script that night. Anthony later moved on to another project, forgot about the story, and left town to work as a camera assistant on a film shoot. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him, asking if the police had questioned him about anything. Anthony was surprised by the question and learned about Sarah's disappearance and the suspicious circumstances surrounding it. He decided to go to the police himself. The authorities instructed Anthony to have an open conversation with Liam and try to get him to confess. To do this, Anthony invited Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment. Knowing Liam's desire to be in a movie, Liam took the bait and suggested they meet in person to discuss the details. The police installed a hidden camera in Anthony's car and told him to carefully get Liam to confess when they met. When Liam got into the car, he looked around cautiously, then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in old bills, saying it was for the filming equipment. Anthony asked where Liam got the old money, and Liam hesitated before admitting that it belonged to Sarah, saying that he and Preston had taken it from her house because the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide further details, his admission was enough evidence for the police to arrest him and Preston on suspicion of being accomplices. Preston agreed to cooperate with the authorities and made a deal with the prosecution. He admitted to helping his friend Liam cover up the evidence and dispose of Sarah's body, but claimed he did not participate in the murder itself. According to Preston, Liam had planned to steal Sarah's inheritance as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept the inheritance a secret, even from her best friend, but revealed it to Liam when she started planning a trip to Canada. Liam convinced her to withdraw the money from the bank and keep it in a home safe, and even borrowed a significant amount from her before the murder. When Sarah's father was away on a business trip, Liam put his plan into action. He promised Preston $25,000 to help him, but planned to do the actual killing himself. Liam convinced Sarah to withdraw the money, and then spent the day with her, waiting for the right moment to strike. He locked her dog in another room, approached Sarah from behind, and strangled her. The crime unfolding was more complicated than anticipated. Initially, Sarah, being athletic and strong, put up a fierce struggle until she lost consciousness. However, she would occasionally show signs of life, making it difficult for the perpetrator to be certain of her demise. Took around half an hour to confirm that Sarah had stopped breathing. After leaving Sarah's house, Liam went to work, at which point Preston entered the house through the back door. Avoiding the camera's view, Preston dragged Sarah's body to the garage and cleaned up the room. A few hours later, returned to Sarah's house, took a small safe from her room, and placed the body in the car. He drove away carefully to avoid being captured on the neighbor's camera. Liam met Preston at the bridge, where they disposed of the body in the river. They wiped down the steering wheel and drove back to Liam's house in Preston's car to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe, rather than the expected $100,000. Despite this, they decided not to spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only used the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. Despite confessing, Liam McAtasney denied involvement, trying to blame his friend instead. His lawyer claimed he was innocent, suggesting Taylor had acted alone. Since Sarah's body was never found and her disappearance was still unclear, there was a small chance she was still alive, having vanished without her belongings. However, a search of Liam's house found a key matching the buried safe. Identified by Preston, the trial lasted over 2 years, but despite the lack of a body and Liam's denials, his guilt was proven through evidence. The script written months before the incident, the key found in his home, his recorded words in Anthony's car, and the old bills he provided all contributed to the verdict. Furthermore, fingerprints of both Preston and Liam were found inside the safe, and a colleague testified that Liam was absent from work that night, asking to be covered. Liam McAtasney was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His accomplice, who did not directly participate in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Lisa Marie Ziegert was born in March 1968 and spent the majority of her life in Agawam, Massachusetts. She was one of 4 children in a tight-knit family. Lisa had a deep passion for music and played several instruments, including the flute and saxophone, in the Agawam High School band. She was also a drum major in the band for 2 years. Throughout her high school years, she was actively involved in various extracurricular activities, including being a member of the National Honor Society and the American Field Service, as well as contributing to both the school newspaper and the literary magazine. After graduating from Agawam High in 1986, she attended Westfield State College, where she graduated cum laude with a degree in elementary education in 1990. Lisa's dream was to become a teacher, and her love for children led her to work at a summer camp for several years and teach Sunday school at her parish. She was beloved by children, who appreciated her ability to embrace the silly, joyful side of life, even as an adult. Although Lisa did not secure a teaching position immediately after college, she was hired as a teacher's aide at Agawam Middle School, where she primarily worked with students in the special education program. Music remained a significant part of her life. If a favorite song played on the radio while she was driving, she would often pull into a parking lot, crank up the volume, and step out of the car to dance. Lisa also enjoyed drawing and frequently gave her artwork as gifts to friends and family. As a young adult, Lisa remained close to her family and had a tight-knit group of friends, many of whom were also close to the Sievert family. Lisa's boyfriend, Blair, co-owned a house with one of the friends he had in common with Lisa, and they had several other members of their friend group as roommates, including Lisa's sister, Lynn. In addition to working at the middle school during the day, 24-year-old Lisa also worked in the evenings as a clerk at Brittany's card and gift shop where she had been employed since 1989. When one of Lisa's co-workers, named Sophia, arrived at the card shop on the morning of April 16, 1992, she was surprised to see Lisa's car still in the parking lot, as Lisa should have been at her job at the middle school at that time. When she went to the front door, she found it unlocked. The lights were still on and the music was still playing when she went inside. Lisa would normally turn both of them off before leaving for the night and never forgot to lock up at the end of her shift. Sophia did not immediately panic, thinking perhaps Lisa had forgotten something at the store the night before and had returned on a break between classes, maybe turning on all of the lights and the music to help her open the store while she was there. Sophia called out Lisa's name but got no answer. She walked up down the aisles looking for Lisa but did not find her. She did find Lisa's purse behind the counter near the cash register. At this point, Sophia knew that something was wrong, and her fears only increased when she found a back room in disarray. She ran out of the store and to another business across the street to call the police. Lisa had not reported to work at Agawam Middle School on 16th, which was unusual enough that the school called her mother, inquiring about her. Lisa's mother, Dee, did not immediately panic, assuming there was an innocent explanation for Lisa not going to work, like her oversleeping, which was unusual but not impossible. Word of the scene at the card store and Lisa's disappearance got around the small community quickly, however, reaching Lisa's sister, Lynn, shortly after Sophia called the police. Lynn went to her mother's job to tell her that Lisa was missing, and at that point Dee realized that something truly was wrong. At the card store, police found a dent in the door that looked like a heel mark and boxes in the back that were crushed, as though someone had been on top of them. There was also a small amount of blood splatter on several boxes. It appeared that Lisa had somehow been lured to the back of the store, where there had been a struggle. Police theorized that she had been taken out of the back entrance on the side of the building and into an alley. 2 doors and a card rack were removed by police as evidence. No money was found to be missing from the cash register. Lisa's shift on 15th had started at 4 p.m., and she was supposed to close the store at 9. She was the only employee at the store for her shift. A police officer had noticed that the lights at the car shop had still been on at 3 a.m. and put it in his notes but could not follow up on it because he then was called to transport a prisoner. Lisa had spoken with the owner of the carpet store next door for about 15 minutes before he left to go home at 7:35 after closing his store. They commiserated over the parking problems at the shopping caused by people using its lot when going to the nearby bowling alley instead of the stores in the center. Before he left, he told Lisa he wouldn't be challenging any of the drivers because, in his words, there are a lot of crazy people out there. Authorities were eventually able to narrow down the time of Lisa's disappearance to a short window of time. The last transaction on the cash register occurred at 8:20 p.m. Another customer arrived at the store at 9:0:5 but found it empty. She thought she heard a noise from the back of the store but left without investigating it. This meant Lisa vanished sometime between ringing out the purchase at 8:20 and when the customer arrived just after 9 on April 15. Scent tracking dogs were brought in and nearby drains and sewers were searched. Officers searched the surrounding area on foot, and helicopters were used to search the area from above. Both the state police and the FBI were brought into the investigation. The Westfield River was not far from the shop, so its banks were also searched. Numerous people who knew Lisa, both in Massachusetts and in Connecticut, were interviewed. For most of the day on 16th, the case was treated as a missing persons case, but on 17th, Agawam Police Lieutenant Robert Campbell told the press that the chances of Lisa simply walking away from the store were slim, and the following morning he formally announced that the case was considered a kidnapping as their investigation had ruled out other possibilities. April 19th was Easter Sunday in 1992. With Lisa still missing, all 12 churches in Agawam passed out white ribbons for their congregants to wear as a sign of hope that Lisa would soon be found and of support for her family at their services that morning. Later that day, around 2 p.m., a man was walking his dog just a few miles away from the card shop, looking into a wooded area off of Route 75. He saw what appeared to be a partially clothed woman's body and called the police. Based off of the clothing with the body and a charm bracelet on her wrist, the woman was identified as Lisa Ziegert. Lisa's autopsy would show that she had been raped, and in addition to numerous defensive injuries, she had suffered 8 knife wounds. The fatal wound had been to her neck. Lisa's disappearance had been followed by 3 days of snow and sleet, so when investigators responded to the scene, they were up to their ankles in mud. They followed in each other's tracks so as to preserve evidence, such as the tire tracks that were visible in the area. After visiting the crime scene, Agawam Police Detective Wayne Nacy sped over to the Ziegert house, fearing that if he slowed down at all, he would lose his nerve and leave the difficult task of informing Lisa's family of her death to someone else. He tried to think of the least offensive word he could use for dead. He did not have to make such a determination, however, as when he arrived at the Ziegert family home, Lisa's mother, Dee, knew by the fact that he had come to her home that Lisa had been found and asked him if she was dead, leaving him only the task of confirming it. Dee would say, nearly 3 decades later, that she still admired him for the bravery he showed by coming to tell her in person. Lisa's funeral mass was said at Sacred Heart Church, where Lisa had been a Sunday school teacher. More than 900 people were in attendance. In early May, Joseph O'Neill, the owner of Brittany's card and gift shop, made the decision to permanently close the store. He had been considering doing so for some time, but the dismay he felt knowing Lisa had been taken from the store and the grief he felt over his employee's death finalized his decision. The store closed for the final time on May 30th. Lisa's murder was devastating not only to her family and friends, but to her community as well. Agawam previously had a very small town feel to it, and its residents felt safe there. That all changed after Lisa was abducted and killed. Some parents refused to let their daughters go to work for a time, and large numbers of women signed up for self-defense classes. Within 2 days of the discovery of Lisa's body, more than 300 women had filed for permits to carry firearms or mace. Local businesses began escorting employees to their cars when they left at night and eliminating single clerk shifts. Police also began offering to perform check-ins at businesses that were open late to ensure the safety of the people working there. All 8 members of the Detective Bureau at the Agawam Police Department were put on the case, and 8 other investigators from other agencies joined them. The FBI provided resources for the investigation, and the Connecticut State Police were brought in because of the proximity of the site where Lisa's body was found to the state border. Lisa's case was being worked on nearly constantly, with investigators working shifts of 18 hours or longer, spanning every day of the week for several months. Community organizations and local businesses donated a total of $5,000 for a reward for information that led to the arrest of Lisa's killer. A single-source male DNA sample had been identified from the crime scene. While DNA science was still a relatively new tool in law enforcement, it played an important role in the investigation. While no one in the Sievert family or Lisa's circle of friends ever suspected Lisa's boyfriend, Blair, of being the perpetrator, he was investigated thoroughly by police because of his relationship with Lisa. He had an alibi for the time of the murder, and his DNA was not a match to that found at the crime scene. Numerous other friends and associates of Lisa's were investigated and had their DNA tested as well. No DNA match was found, and no other clues tying any of them to the crime could be identified. Investigators were flooded with tips. They investigated and rolled out owners of trucks similar to a suspicious vehicle seen in the area the night of Lisa's death, a man who threw out some carpet and a t-shirt at a local car wash, and a man who had allegedly gone to the snack bar at Lisa's women's only health club so that he could stare at women while they exercised. A large number of calls were from people who were certain that they knew who killed Lisa based on a baseless rumor and subsequent conspiracy theory. One of Lisa's male friends, who was the other owner of the home Lisa's boyfriend Blair co-owned, worked at his father's restaurant near the card shop. Word spread around town that he and Blair were in a relationship and that Lisa had walked in on them, thus giving him a motive to kill her. While that would have been a potential motive had the story been true, it was a total fabrication with no evidence to support it. The friend was the son of a retired police detective, which led to allegations that Lisa's case remained unsolved because police were covering up the involvement of the son of one of their own. Since this friend was connected both to the police and to Lisa, he may have been an early topic of speculation, which subsequently gave rise to the false love triangle rumors. This friend's DNA was not a match to the sample from the scene, and he had a restaurant full of customers and coworkers who could attest to his presence at the restaurant on the night of April 15th, most importantly during the window of time when Lisa was abducted. It was the policy of the police to not publicly exclude suspects prior to the solving of a case, however, so while they had evidence supporting his innocence, they could not announce any of it. People who believed the rumors would continue to call in claiming he was guilty every time there was a renewed appeal for information in the case for decades, which did nothing to help the investigation. Despite ongoing investigative efforts, police eventually ran out of leads. "It's like you hope the hand of God is going to come down and tap you on the shoulder," Detective Massey told the Union News on the first anniversary of Lisa's murder. But it turns out to be just rehashing old leads and trying to come up with new angles. Investigators were therefore when the national television program, Unsolved Mysteries, featured Lisa's case in October of 1993. Detective Massey went to California so that he could be at the show's phone bank when the segment first aired and receive any tips as soon as they came in. Within an hour of the broadcast, more than 100 tips related to the case were called in from throughout the Northeast. One of these tips was from the customer who had entered the card shop just after 9 p.m. on the day of the crime, which allowed to identify such a narrow window of time during which Lisa was abducted. A few other tips worth following up on were received as well, but the case remained unsolved. While Lisa's time teaching children in Agawam was cut short, her family made sure she still made a major impact on education in the area. In 1995, Lisa's parents donated $1,100 to Agawam High School's science department for the purchase of equipment that would allow them to hold classes on genetics, a subject that remained close to their hearts as they still hoped it would help solve their daughter's case. They also established the Lisa M. Ziegert Memorial Fund, which distributed over $35,000 in scholarships within the first decade that followed Lisa's murder. On the 10th anniversary of her death, the fund donated $10,000 to the children's section at the Agawam Public Library. Lisa continued to remain an important part of her family's lives in the years following her murder. When she got married, Lisa's sister Lynn and her new husband brought the bouquet Lisa should have carried as the maid of honor at their wedding to her gravesite. The anniversary of Lisa's death was regularly marked by a candlelight vigil. Dee Ziegert never turned down an interview request, and even as years dragged on without answers, she remained committed to using the media to keep her daughter's memory alive and continue her family's mission to get justice for Lisa. The strongest piece of evidence police had in the case was the DNA found at the scene. However, they could never find a match to it in any criminal database despite regularly checking for one. They therefore began looking at alternative means by which to use the DNA to generate leads. In September of 2016, Hampton District Attorney Anthony Galliuni released 2 images developed following more than a year's worth of work by Parabon Nanolabs. Parabon used the DNA from the crime scene to predict certain physical characteristics of the man it belonged to and generated sketches showing what he may look like at 2 different ages. More than 170 tips were called in after the sketches were released. It would be almost exactly 1 more year before the contributor of that DNA was identified. On September 18, 2017, more than 25 years after Lisa's murder, it was announced that an arrest had been made in her case. 48-year-old Gary E. Shara was in custody, charged with first-degree murder, aggravated rape, and kidnapping. Shara's involvement in the case had first been suggested in 1993. Police in Agawam received a phone call from a divorce lawyer in Seattle who told them he had a client who believed her soon-to-be ex-husband had something to do with Lisa's murder. Joyce McDonald Chara had lived with her husband Gary in his hometown of Longmeadow, Massachusetts, just east of Agawam. She claimed that he was unusually interested in the media coverage of Lisa's case and would hurry into the room whenever it was mentioned on the news and remain fixated on the television for the duration of the report. Police followed up on Gary Shara, but Joyce's credibility was quickly called into question. According to friends, she had a long history of mental health issues and alcohol abuse. She and Gary had a tumultuous relationship and were in the middle of a lengthy and contentious custody battle over their young son, whom Joyce had taken to Seattle without Gary's knowledge or permission, even though he was the boy's custodial parent. Because of the notoriety of Lisa's case, police had previously received numerous tips from women claiming their partners had been involved that turned out to have been called in following infidelity, abuse, or a breakup in the relationship. The circumstances surrounding Joyce and Gary's relationship raised concerns that this may have been one of those tips. Gary was contacted, but denied any involvement in the crime and investigators' requests for a DNA sample. A file on Gary Shara was created and remained in the case file. Shara did speak with investigators more than once about Lisa's case. Investigators compiled a list of men they had files on who had previously refused to submit DNA samples. Shara was on that list. In 2002, he agreed to a short interview but said during it that he wouldn't provide his DNA because he was afraid of cloning. Investigators spoke to him again in 2008. During this interview, Shara seemed very aware of the possibility of the police collecting his DNA, even though he continued to refuse to provide a sample. He would not touch anything in the room, including the table, and refused the bottle of water offered to him. Following the creation of the forensic sketches by Parabon, authorities went to a grand jury in August of 2017 and obtained court orders compelling 11 men to submit their DNA for comparison to the sample from Lisa's crime scene. These men all had a file in the investigation records and had the physical characteristics predicted by Parabon. One of these men was Gary Shara. When Massachusetts state troopers went to Chara's home to inform him that he was now legally obligated to provide them with a sample of his DNA on September 13, 2017, he was not there and they were only able to speak with his roommate. They told the roommate that they had important paperwork to deliver to Gary and left a business card. The next day, Chara's girlfriend came in to see the state troopers. She had discovered 3 handwritten documents Shara had left for her in her apartment. One was a last will and testament, one was a brief note of apology to the Ziegert family, and the third and longest was an extensive confession to the rape and murder of Lisa Ziegert. I've never really been or even felt normal. From a very young age, I was fascinated by abduction and bondage. I could never keep it too far from my mind for long. On that fateful day, I let myself do something terrible, he wrote in the letter. I had no intention of killing her when I grabbed her, but events spun out of my control. And in the eyes of the law, it is all the same. I had never regretted anything so much. I was young and headstrong and foolish, emphasis on that last part. While he admitted to Lisa's murder and to his lengthy fascination with abduction, he said that Lisa was his only victim. I also never did anything of the like again. I hated what happened. I despised myself. I thought of turning myself in 100 of times over the years. But I truly am a coward, he wrote. Today it will end. I will take my own life or face the music as it were. Chara was still not sure which of these options he would take. He indicated that he knew that once his DNA was analyzed, he would be sent to prison for the rest of his life. As of the writing of the letter, he was unsure if he was strong enough to finally take responsibility for his actions, or if he would take what he described as the coward's way out. Authorities immediately began searching for Chara, both because he was trying to evade them and because they believed he would take his own life rather than face prosecution. Chara's black Honda Civic was ultimately found in the parking lot of Johnson Memorial Medical Center in Stafford Springs, Connecticut, with what appeared to be a suicide note on its dashboard. To whomever finds my body, I apologize for any psychological trauma incurred. Call Mass State Police. Thank you, it read. Chara had attempted to his own life by overdosing on Motrin, but had then driven himself to the emergency room. He was taken into custody on September 16th and arraigned as a fugitive from justice prior to his extradition back to Massachusetts. Search warrants for both Chara's apartment and his girlfriend's apartment had been issued and were executed on September 15th. Several items that could be a potential source of Chara's DNA, including his toothbrush, were collected and tested. His DNA was in fact a match to the DNA from the crime scene. Chara's ex-wife Joyce could not provide further information about why she had initially believed Gary was involved in Lisa's murder because she had passed away in 2014. In court documents related to her divorce from Gary, authorities found an allegation by her that Gary had told her he could only have sex with her if he were in control and had a knife to her throat. Speaking to her family members, investigators also learned that Joyce had called her the day after Lisa's abduction, concerned by the fact that her husband had come home very late the night before, full of nervous energy and covered in scratches. Chara had also given Joyce a music box featuring a blue carousel horse and told her he had purchased it from Brittany's card shop. He told her a little old lady with gray hair had sold it to him, but the store did not employ anyone matching that description. By the time Chara was arrested, there was no way to confirm if the exact music box had been sold at Brittany's, but former employees did say that it was consistent with the kind of items they sold at the time. Even without Joyce's testimony, prosecutors believed they had a very strong case against Chara thanks to the confession letter and the DNA found at the crime scene. Despite this strong evidence, including his own confession to the crime, Chara still pleaded not guilty to the charges he was facing. Prosecutors and Sarah's defense team began preparing for trial. 2 years later, however, Sarah appeared in court to make a change in plea. On September 25, 2019, he confirmed to a judge that he was the individual who had murdered Lisa Ziegert and that he was forever giving up his right to a jury trial. Guilty pleas to a charge of first-degree murder are rare in Massachusetts, as the state has a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for that charge. The district attorney's office would be dropping the kidnapping and aggravated rape charges as the statute of limitations on them had expired. Lisa's family was in the courtroom as Chara was formally sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They were able to make victim impact statements in the courtroom and following the proceedings. Dee Ziegert expressed her gratitude to the people who had cared so much for her and had never given up on her Lisa, and her relief that her family would not have to go through the further stress of a jury trial. Following the judge's acceptance of Chara's guilty plea, Hampton District Attorney Anthony Gallooni made a statement saying, "It remains tragically true that Lisa will never return to her loving family, but the search for criminal justice ended today with the beginning of Gary Chara's life sentence in prison. The Ziegert family's unbroken faith, strength, and grace over these many years encouraged and inspired me, the many investigators who worked this case, and the public to relentlessly search for the truth. To those many investigators from the Massachusetts State Police, Agawam Police Department, prosecutors from the Hampton District Attorney's Office, and those in the public who never forgot Lisa and believed that justice would someday result, thank you." The case of Alicia Ross. A young Canadian woman named Alicia Ross vanished without a trace from her own bedroom in the middle of the night. The police were unable to find either a body or any significant evidence, and as a result the investigation stagnated. The case might have remained unsolved had the criminal not turned himself in to the police. Alicia Ross was born on February 8, 1980 in the Canadian city of Markham in the province of Ontario. There is no information about her biological parents, but it is known that they gave up their rights to the child, and she was adopted at a few months old by a couple named Marvin and Sharon Ross. Her adoptive parents provided her with love and care, and they did everything to ensure that their daughter had everything she needed and could fully develop her talents. When Alicia started school, her adoptive parents decided to divorce, but they maintained a friendly relationship and continued to participate together in their daughter's life. Soon, Sharon remarried, and her new husband, named Julius Forrest, treated the child as if she were his own daughter. The girl performed well in school, demonstrated exceptional skills in drawing, and also developed a passion for photography and a love for discovering new cities and countries. After finishing school, she spent a year in Australia, where she traveled and enjoyed life before returning home and enrolling in university in the summer of 2005. The 25-year-old Alicia went on a hiking trip in the mountains with her friends, where she met a young man named Sean, with whom she began a romantic relationship in early July. He was 4 years older than her, but the small age difference did not bother the couple. On August 16th, the young woman, along with her adoptive mother and their dogs, went for a stroll in the park. Alicia appeared cheerful and shared that she was expecting a promotion at work to the position of senior sales manager in the coming days. She was very proud, as she had been working hard for a long time, and her efforts were about to be rewarded. Additionally, the young woman discussed her boyfriend, Sean, whom she had been dating for just over a month, but seemed deeply in love with. Alicia hoped that this romance could grow into something more meaningful in the future and expressed a desire to introduce her new boyfriend to her adoptive parents by arranging a family dinner. After her walk in the park, the mother returned home and her daughter went on a date with her sweetheart. She promised not to be gone long, as she had to get up early for work the next day, where her promotion was to be decided. The women said their goodbyes and went their separate ways. Sharon never saw her daughter alive again. The mysterious disappearance from her own house that night, after meeting with Sean, is what led to the unsolved case. Alicia invited him to her house and they had a great time together. Around midnight, the young man went home and Alicia accompanied him to the door, which served as a second exit from the backyard. They said goodbye with a kiss and he left, promising to call her as soon as he got home. Around midnight, as promised, Sean called his girlfriend, but she didn't answer the phone. He wasn't overly concerned, thinking Alicia had simply fallen asleep since she had to get up early for work. However, the next morning, when he tried to call her again and she still didn't pick up, he became genuinely worried and contacted a mutual acquaintance who worked in the same office as Alicia. From her, he learned that Alicia hadn't come to work, and he immediately rushed to her house. On August 17th in the morning, Sharon and Julius planned to play golf with friends and left the house at 10. They saw their daughter's car in the driveway, but assumed someone had taken her, so they went about their day. A while later, Sean went to Alicia's house but couldn't find her, so he called the police to report her missing. He then called Sharon to inform her. The couple rushed home, where the police were already there. Sean was the first to notice Alicia was missing and informed the police. He was also the last to see her the night before she disappeared, saying they had parted ways at the gate around midnight and hadn't heard from her since. When Sharon and Julius approached the house, law enforcement was already there, inspecting the area and speaking with Sean, who had called them. The young man appeared visibly nervous and distraught. When the mother looked into Alicia's room, she immediately noticed that all her daughter's personal belongings, which she never left the house without, were in their places. Her purse, passport, driver's license, keys, cell phone, as well as her bank cards and cash, were all left in the room, suggesting she wouldn't have gone anywhere, let alone left without them. The gate was open but not forced, implying that the missing person either let her abductor in or willingly left with someone from the yard. In the backyard, the police found some disturbance. The lawn and flowers in one area were trampled, as if someone had fallen there. Also, a pair of cigarettes and the right sandal of the girl, the one she had been wearing the evening before, were found on the ground, laid out in a straight line. Neither Alicia nor her parents smoked, so the cigarettes did not belong to them, and Sean claimed he never smoked that particular brand, leaving the ownership and arrangement of the cigarettes unclear. Sean was almost immediately considered the prime suspect. Firstly, he was noticeably nervous and his account seemed somewhat confused and disjointed. Secondly, he was the first to report his girlfriend's disappearance to the police, even before speaking with her parents and confirming that they too had not seen her. Thus, he definitely knew she was missing. Additionally, law enforcement found biological traces on the girl's bed belonging both to her and Sean. Based on this, the investigation speculated that Alicia might have denied Sean intimacy, and he decided to force her, then trying to cover his tracks, staged her disappearance, which he likely caused by ending her life. When Sean was brought to the police station, questioned, and the investigator's theory presented to him, the young man was shocked. He was distressed to be considered the primary suspect and swore he would never harm his girlfriend as he loved her. He also acknowledged that they did indeed have intimate moments that evening, but insisted it was consensual. The missing girl's parents also had nothing negative to say about Sean. He had not argued with their daughter, had not mistreated her, and she spoke only positively of him. Their relationship was developing quickly and quite happily, to the extent that Alicia even hoped to have a future with him. Moreover, the parents noted that their daughter had no plans or reasons to leave. She was eagerly awaiting a promotion at her beloved job, and being a responsible person, she would never just leave everything behind. But even if some unforeseen circumstances had arisen, she would certainly have informed her parents and definitely would not have left without her documents, money, and phone. Police lacked sufficient evidence or grounds to detain Sean, and so, after questioning him at the station, they released him. Nevertheless, law enforcement did not rule him out as a suspect and continued to monitor the young man. Sean himself appeared dejected and highly distressed. The extensive search effort for the missing woman began the day after her disappearance. Initially, a thorough inspection of the home and yard was conducted, and investigators closely examined the surrounding area and interviewed neighbors. However, no one reported hearing or seeing anything suspicious that night. Law enforcement theorized that the woman disappeared sometime between midnight, when she said goodbye to Sean, and sunrise, a time when the streets are usually quiet and deserted, making it challenging to find witnesses. Alicia's photos were distributed as flyers throughout the city, providing phone numbers for people to report any information about her whereabouts. The story of the missing woman was widely covered in the news and featured in popular publications, sparking significant public interest and prompting hundreds of volunteers and concerned citizens to join the search. The police received numerous daily calls related to the case, although most of the information turned out to be false or mistaken. Nevertheless, each tip and theory was investigated in the hope of finding any leads. The search area was continuously expanded, involving more people. Thorough checks were conducted in abandoned buildings, wooded areas, and wastelands. Sean also actively participated in the search efforts, despite still being the prime suspect. Feeling wronged, the young man turned to the media and gave a significant interview where he expressed his deep love for Alicia and showed photos of them looking very happy together. He tearfully pleaded for help in the search, appearing utterly devastated by the situation. The search for Alicia became one of the most extensive operations in Ontario's history. Every difficult-to-reach ravine and marshy area was scoured, but no clues, leads, or even hints about the missing woman's location were found. Her parents also appealed to the public through the media, expressing their belief that their daughter was alive but being held against her will somewhere. They implored whoever had their daughter to let her return home unharmed and not to harm her in any way. Sean's lack of an alibi led the police to lean towards the theory that someone Alicia knew personally had abducted and possibly ended her life. This hypothesis was supported by the lack of signs of struggle, no evidence of forced entry, and the gate being left open. However, no concrete leads were found. The cigarettes found on the ground bore only a heavily smeared fingerprint, which couldn't be identified. Investigators thoroughly checked Alicia's contacts and reviewed all calls and messages on her phone and email, yet nothing suspicious was uncovered. On the 6th day of the search, the case was officially reclassified as a criminal act, despite the lack of evidence. Sean remained the prime suspect. Sean lived alone in his own house, located about 10 miles from Alicia's home. After realizing that public suspicion had intensified following his media appearance, he stopped participating in the search and refused to speak with the press. Investigators interviewed Sean 3 more times, but his story remained consistent. He was then offered a lie detector test, which he refused, convincing the police even more firmly that he was involved in the crime. 2 weeks after the disappearance, Sean was arrested on an unrelated charge. He was taken into custody late at night for driving under the influence and resisting arrest. Speculations arose that he was attempting to drown his guilt in alcohol. Following Sean's arrest, Alicia's parents gave another interview, sharing that they had not personally known the young man and only knew about him through their daughter's accounts. They believed she was happy, but now they considered the possibility that their daughter might have withheld certain details to avoid upsetting them, though she had planned to introduce her boyfriend to her family soon. Police interviewed Sean's neighbors to determine if they had noticed anything unusual recently, such as him disposing of large trash bags, behaving suspiciously, leaving unexpectedly, or cleaning his car. However, no significant information emerged from these inquiries. Detectives were left hoping that Sean might eventually confess to everything. About a month after Alicia's disappearance, the media attention surrounding her case began to fade. The search continued, but it was no longer prominently featured in newspapers or news broadcasts, and the investigation seemed to have reached a dead end. The only option left for law enforcement was to keep pressuring Sean, hoping he would eventually confess to the crime. Then, a completely unexpected development occurred in the case on September 20th, 2005, more than a month after Alicia's disappearance. 31-year-old Daniel Silvestre, a local resident, called the police and confessed to ending the girl's life, revealing where he had hidden her body. It's important to note that this man had not been under suspicion previously, and the police had not considered him at all during their initial investigation. At first, it appeared that the man merely sought fame and attention, and had decided to take responsibility for the most notorious case in recent years. However, all doubts were dispelled when the police discovered the girl's body at the location he had specified. Daniel Silvestre was an unemployed recluse who lived in his mother's house, which was adjacent to the Ross family home. The two properties were separated by overgrown shrubs, creating a nearly impenetrable barrier. Despite living virtually side by side for their entire lives, Daniel and the victim had never interacted before. Alicia had seen Daniel on his property a few times, and considered him mentally unwell due to his strange behavior. The police had not shown an interest in Daniel earlier, as he seemed to be a reclusive and isolated individual who had not drawn attention to himself. Daniel had significant social challenges from a young age. He struggled to make friends, was ridiculed at school, and every effort to form relationships ended in complete failure, leading him to develop a deep resentment towards women. As a child, girls would call him a loser and say they would never associate with someone like him. At age 8, Silvestre was diagnosed with a social behavioral disorder and had been under ongoing psychological treatment, but the therapy did not provide much improvement. In his teenage years, he confessed that he had fantasies of suddenly attacking and overpowering a girl, which excited him. However, specialists were confident that these fantasies would remain just that, and not manifest into real actions. After finishing school, Daniel stopped attending therapy sessions, decided not to continue his education, and became a recluse. He lived in his mother's house, isolating himself from the outside world, spending his days sitting in his room, often on adult websites, and occasionally venturing out in the evenings to secretly watch his neighbors, peeping into their windows. He particularly enjoyed watching when someone was engaged in sexual activity, as the spectacle excited him, yet Daniel remained a virgin well into his 30s, satisfying his desires through solitary activities. The neighbors hardly ever saw him, and thus considered him a harmless guy. Initially, Silvestre claimed that the girl's death was accidental, and he hid the body to avoid punishment. According to him, when he realized the girl showed no signs of life, he placed her in the trunk of his mother's car and drove about 50 miles out of town, hiding the body in a bushy ravine by the side of a country road. 3 weeks later, fearing that the body would be discovered, he moved it in the middle of the night even further away, to a deserted area. The body was found in the place Daniel indicated, thereby dispelling the last doubts about his guilt. However, the condition of the remains indicated that the girl had been dealt with extreme cruelty. The injuries were such that it looked as if she had been hit by a car. An autopsy showed that Alicia had nearly all her ribs broken, her neck and both arms, and also suffered extensive closed cranial trauma with internal bleeding. The exact cause of death could not be determined, but at least 3 injuries were incompatible with life. Forensic experts were shocked, as they had never encountered anything like it before. It was necessary to clarify the circumstances and chronology of events on that fateful evening to determine how exactly the girl received her injuries. The convict initially claimed that he had an argument with his neighbor on a bush-covered path between their homes. During the verbal altercation, the neighbor called him a loser, which angered him, and he struck her on the head. When she fell, he kicked her several times in the chest. Realizing she was not breathing, he decided to hide the body and then moved it again when the search area expanded. However, there were missing details and specifics in his story that did not add up. It was unclear what Daniel was doing at his neighbor's house at night, why they began arguing, and what caused such a brutal beating. The evidence found at the scene was laid out in a straight line, making it challenging to reconstruct the full sequence of events. The investigation revealed that Silvestre had gone out to observe his neighbors. He noticed that Alicia's boyfriend had come over, and he approached their house closely as the couple was being intimate. He watched them from a window, then moved back to the bushes but did not leave. As midnight approached, the lovers went outside and kissed by the gate, just a couple of feet away from the observing neighbor. When Sean left, the girl returned to the yard and noticed Daniel. She became very angry, realizing that he had been spying on her and her boyfriend all this time. She started yelling at him, calling him a pervert and demanding that he leave immediately. Finally, Alicia called him a loser, which acted as a trigger for Sylvester, as that was exactly what other girls had called him during his childhood. Filled with rage, Sylvester punched the girl forcefully on the head and knocked her to the ground. She tried to resist and grabbed her attacker's hair, but he began to choke her. When his grip loosened, Daniel quickly stood up and began kicking Alicia while she was lying down, primarily striking her chest, back, neck, and head. Forensic experts later counted 33 fractures on the victim's body and extensive internal bleeding. When the man realized his neighbor was dead, he moved her body to his garage, undressed her, and then masturbated to relieve the tension, according to his testimony. The examination confirmed that Sylvester did not violate the body. He then placed the corpse in the trunk of his mother's car and took it to a remote location outside the city. Upon returning home, the criminal took a shower, changed clothes, and behaved as if nothing had happened. His clothes, the victim's belongings, and the towels he used to clean the crime scene were packed in trash bags and disposed of. The trial and sentencing proceedings began only in April 2007, at which time new details were made public. The defendant confessed that he had ended his neighbor's life, but he and his lawyer insisted that it was unintentional. The defense demanded a psychiatric evaluation, arguing that Daniel was mentally ill and should not be held accountable for his actions, suggesting he be treated in a clinic instead of being incarcerated. However, the prosecution argued that despite his mental illness and anger management issues, Sylvester acted with full knowledge of the consequences of his actions. He kicked the girl mercilessly with all his might, knowing it would likely result in her death. The court-ordered psychiatric evaluation confirmed that the defendant could indeed be considered fully responsible for his actions. Regarding the items found in the backyard, Daniel never admitted to having placed them there, arranged in a straight line. On May 7, 2007, the defendant was found guilty of a second-degree crime and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 16 years. A year later, Canadian singer-songwriter Kathleen Edwards wrote a song titled Alicia Ross, which portrayed the events from the young woman's perspective during the final moments of her life. On the morning of December 10, 2017, Gary Bentley, a 33-year-old resident of Campbellsburg, Kentucky, woke up bright and early along with his lovely wife, Tasha, who was 34 years old, and their 4-year-old son, Connor. Despite being married for 5 blissful years, Tasha had recently lost her job, which had left her feeling sad and miserable. The stress of finding a new job had taken a toll on her. However, on that particular day, Tasha returned from work in the evening only to discover that Gary had not been answering her calls or messages. As she approached their house, she noticed the garage door wide open and an eerie silence enveloping the premises. A sense of fear washed over Tasha as she realized that something was amiss. What had happened to Gary? Had he vanished without a trace? Or was there a more troubling explanation for his absence? Campbellsburg, situated in Henry County, Kentucky, is a charming community adorned with farmhouse-style homes. Despite its tranquil ambience, it is conveniently located just 40 miles away from the bustling city of Louisville, offering its residents easy access to urban amenities. As of 2020, the population of Campbellsburg stood at 836, steadily increasing over the past 2 decades. The town is part of the Louisville metropolitan area, renowned for its cultural landmarks and icons. Notably, it is the hometown of the legendary boxer, Muhammad Ali, and serves as the venue for the prestigious Kentucky Derby. Additionally, Campbellsburg probably claims to be the birthplace of Kentucky Fried Chicken and is home to the University of Louisville and the esteemed Louisville Slugger Company, known for manufacturing baseball bats. Like any city, Campbellsburg is not immune to crime, but its crime rate of 1.66 per thousand residents remains relatively low compared to other areas in the region. In this idyllic community, Gary Bentley resided with his wife and son, cherishing the values of family. Born on August 31st, 1984 in Louisville, Kentucky, Gary was the son of Gerald and Lisa Bentley. He held a deep bond with his younger sister, Amy, and embraced the importance of familial connections. From the very start, Gary displayed a genuine country boy spirit and reveled in the wonders of the great outdoors. He found joy in hunting, fishing, and immersing himself in the breathtaking beauty of the Kentucky landscape. Additionally, he had a talent for collecting guns and his passion for the wilderness was only surpassed by his unwavering loyalty to his beloved sports team, the Kentucky Wildcats. As a young man, Gary pursued a career as an electrician and successfully graduated as a skilled member of the local brotherhood IBEW 369. In 2006, Gary's life took an unexpected turn when he crossed paths with Tasha Lynn Etherden, a nurse who was a year older than him. Tasha's outspoken and outgoing nature perfectly complemented Gary's quiet and laid-back personality, creating an undeniable connection between them. They dated for 6 years, establishing a strong foundation for their future together. Finally, in September 2012, Gary and Tasha exchanged vows, solidifying their lifelong commitment to each other. Their home in Campbellsburg was soon blessed with the arrival of their son, Connor, who quickly became the center of their universe. Gary proved to be an exceptional father, showering his son with love and attention. He delighted in chasing the little boy around the house and eagerly anticipated embarking on outdoor adventures with him. The family also cherished their vacations, including a memorable trip to Jamaica in 2016 with their friends Kevin and Amy Day. However, beneath the surface, cracks began to appear in their seemingly idyllic life. Tasha faced challenges at work, putting her job at risk. This uncertainty led to arguments during their vacation. Tensions escalated to the point where it strained Gary's relationship with his closest friend, Kevin. Upon returning home, the situation worsened as Tasha lost her job. Although she eventually found another job, her demeanor grew increasingly irritable and distant, adding further strain to their relationship. Despite these difficulties, Gary remained determined to salvage their marriage, unaware that fate had other plans in store. On December 10, 2017, at 6:54 p.m. Gary's father, Gerald, received a distressing phone call from Tasha, who sounded deeply concerned. Tasha recounted that Gary had failed to answer her calls and messages throughout the entire day. Upon returning home from work, she discovered the garage door wide open, which left her too frightened to enter the house. Concerned for her safety, Gerald drove to their residence in Campbellsburg. He cautiously entered the house and was warmly greeted by their dogs, but his calls for their son Gary went unanswered. Gerald proceeded through the house and eventually arrived at Gary's bedroom, where he was met with a horrifying sight. Gary lay motionless in bed, with a gunshot wound to the back of his head. Overwhelmed by the shocking scene, Gerald immediately dialed 911 for assistance. The paramedics and police from Henry County arrived promptly, but unfortunately, it was too late for Gary. He was pronounced dead at the scene, leaving Gerald devastated. The police discovered a single shell casing next to Gary's lifeless body. The positioning of the body indicated that Gary had been facing away from the bedroom door when the fatal shot was fired, suggesting a cold-blooded execution-style murder within his own home. This revelation stunned the police, especially considering the absence of any signs of forced entry or break-in. Strangely, all of Gary's firearms were missing from the safe, yet nothing else appeared to have been taken. The house remained untouched. However, during their search of the premises, the police stumbled upon a concealed stash of marijuana and cannabis seeds stored in jars, raising suspicions of a potential connection between the death and drug-related activities. Investigators noted that Gary owned several dogs who would typically alert or bark if an unfamiliar person entered the house. Yet none of the neighbors reported hearing any commotion or barking sounds in the vicinity. It was evident that Gary himself had been caught off guard, as there were no signs of a struggle. This led investigators to believe that the perpetrator might have been someone known to the dogs, someone familiar with the Bentley family. As part of the investigation, Tasha was interviewed inside a patrol car. Tasha provided a detailed account of her interactions with Gary on the morning of his deer hunting trip. She mentioned attempting to contact him throughout the day, but received no response. Additionally, Tasha revealed that she had visited their friends Kevin and Amy earlier that day. During the conversation about their friends, Tasha accidentally revealed that Gary and Kevin had a heated argument during their trip to Jamaica, which resulted in Gary throwing Godriga Kevin. Based on this information, the police decided to interview Kevin as a person of interest in the case. However, Kevin was able to provide a solid alibi, leading the police to remove him from the suspect list. As is common in such investigations, the detectives shifted their focus to Tasha Bentley, the surviving spouse. Upon delving into their marital history, the police discovered a relationship filled with challenges and conflicts. The breaking point in their 10-year-long marriage occurred after their vacation in Jamaica in September 2016, when Tasha lost her job due to ongoing issues at work. Although her stress seemed to decrease after securing a new job, there were peculiar incidents involving her cars. In 2016, Tasha contacted her father-in-law, Gerald, claiming her car had broken down and she needed a ride. Strikingly, this was not the first time she found herself in such a situation. There were 3 separate incidents where her cars were intentionally set on fire, leading investigators to question if Tasha orchestrated these events for insurance claims. By 2017, the problems in Gary and Tasha's marriage had intensified. Gary's family and close friends began suspecting that Tasha might be involved in an extramarital affair. She frequently spent a significant amount of time on her phone, often claimed to be working late hours, and appeared emotionally distant. This situation escalated to the point where Tasha started spending entire weekends away from Gary. Gerald made multiple attempts to address the concerning situation with his son, Gary. However, Gary consistently dismissed his family's worries and showed reluctance to discuss the issues in his marriage. One particular incident that stood out for Gary's family was the Thanksgiving holiday in November 2017, just a few weeks before Gary's untimely death. Gary's parents had hosted the holiday gathering at their residence in Louisville. During the celebration, Tasha, Gary's wife, seemed unusually eager to leave. After dinner, she excused herself, claiming she wanted to go shopping alone. However, she returned in the early hours of Black Friday without making any purchases. The following week, Tasha expressed her concerns to Lisa Bentley, her mother-in-law. She expressed her reluctance to attend the funeral, which immediately raised red flags for Amy. Amy sensed that there was more to the story and her intuition proved to be correct. She disclosed to the authorities that Tasha had been engaged in an affair with a coworker named Anthony. The situation had become so serious that Tasha had been planning to leave Gary and move in with Anthony in January 2018. Additionally, the police discovered that both Tasha and Gary had been researching life insurance policies. While Gary had reservations about the idea, Tasha had been advocating for a substantial $1 million policy. These revelations added further complexity to the intricate puzzle surrounding Gary's death. The detectives decided to delve deeper into the matter and made a startling discovery. They found that a newly acquired $1 million life insurance policy had been taken out in Gary's name, just 4 days before the tragic event occurred. Tasha had given her consent to this policy by using Gary's electronic signature. The police now possessed sufficient circumstantial evidence to regard Tasha as their primary suspect. On December 11, 2017, Tasha was summoned to the police station for an interview where she was interrogated about her relationship with Anthony. Initially, Tasha asserted that they were merely colleagues and friends, both inside and outside of work. However, as the interview progressed, she eventually confessed to having an affair with Anthony and planning to move in with him. The conversation then shifted to the contentious topic of the life insurance policy. Tasha vehemently denied any involvement in Gary's death, but the police harbored strong suspicions that she either personally shot him or hired someone to carry out the act. Tasha's narrative crumbled when investigators cautioned her about the potential loss of custody of her son. In an emotionally charged breakdown, she admitted to murdering Gary, but with a twist. She claimed that Gary had allegedly assaulted their 4-year-old son, Connor, by throwing him onto the bed, hitting the wall, and repeatedly striking the child. Tasha asserted that she intended to intervene, but she became the target of Gary's violence as he kicked her. Hours later, while Gary was asleep in bed, Tasha used her personal Ruger firearm to deliver the fatal shot, implying that she acted in self-defense. Tasha further revealed that she emptied the gun safe in an attempt to make the crime appear as a failed robbery. She handed the firearms, including the murder weapon, a handgun with purple grips, to Anthony, who stored them at his sister's residence in Louisville. The police briefly considered the possibility of Anthony being an accomplice, but after questioning him and verifying his alibi, he was cleared of all suspicion. The outcome of the case now depended on verifying Tasha's self-defense claim and determining whether Gary had indeed assaulted his son. The police conducted interviews with friends and family members, as well as sought advice from medical experts. They transported 4-year-old Connor to Morton Children's Hospital in Louisville to assess him for signs of long-term abuse, but the investigation yielded a unanimous outcome. There was no evidence to indicate that Gary had inflicted harm upon his son. In fact, the information gathered portrayed Gary as a dedicated father, son, and husband who had never exhibited any violent tendencies towards anyone. However, it was discovered that Tasha had not only brutally murdered her sleeping husband, but had also fabricated a story about an assault in an attempt to mislead the authorities. Consequently, Tasha Bentley was promptly arrested and charged with the murder of Gary. as well as tampering with physical evidence. Additionally, she faced charges related to the possession and distribution of marijuana, as numerous jars of marijuana and cannabis seeds were found in their residence. Tasha Bentley pleaded guilty to her husband's murder on July 20, 2021, and on September 17, 2021, she received a sentence of 55 years in prison. Currently, she is incarcerated at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women, with her earliest possible parole date set for November 20, 2037, according to her inmate records. Following the sentencing, both Gary and Tasha's families engaged in a custody battle over their son, Connor. After the murder, Tasha took Connor to Bullitt County, Kentucky, and entrusted him to Scarlett Etherton, who was later revealed to be Tasha's great-aunt. In July 2018, the Bullitt County Family Court granted permanent custody of Connor to Etherton. However, the Bentleys and their attorney, Lewis Winter, have claimed that they were not adequately informed about the custody hearing and are now seeking to overturn the custody order. They argue that they have been treated unfairly in Bullitt County, citing Etherton's previous role as a deputy court clerk, which they believe may have influenced the proceedings. Additionally, the Bentleys have raised concerns about their grandson Connor's well-being, alleging that Etherton violated a court order by removing him from therapy and discussing the crime with them. Despite the legal complexities involved, the Bentleys remain steadfast in their pursuit of sole custody for Connor. At the age of 10, Connor continues to grapple with profound emotional distress. He has displayed signs of trauma, often assuming the persona of his late father, Gary, and harboring deep-seated resentment towards his mother, Tasha. When Tasha attempted to arrange a visit with Connor at the correctional facility, he repeatedly expressed disinterest, stating, "Why would I want to visit the person who destroyed my life?" Gary Bentley's tragic story serves as a stark reminder of how financial greed can drive individuals to commit heinous acts, even at the expense of a loved one's life. Now the question arises, was justice truly served for Gary Bentley? And do you agree with the 55-year sentence handed down to Tasha? On the afternoon of March 14, 1968, three boys were playing in a muddy farm field near the intersection of Newland Street and Yorktown Avenue in Huntington Beach, California, when they made a chilling discovery. They found the body of a young woman who had been brutally beaten and had her throat slashed. An autopsy would later reveal that she had also been sexually assaulted. Police searched the area and found a cigarette butt and tire tracks near the body. However, because it had rained the previous night, it was hard to determine the exact type of tire that left the tracks. The location of the tracks suggested that the woman's body may have been dumped from the passenger side of a vehicle. Police had few leads in the case and struggled to identify the woman's killer, as well as the woman herself. She had no identification on her, and no missing persons report matching her description was filed in the following days. The woman appeared to be white or Hispanic, about 5 feet 1 inch tall, and between 20 and 30 years old. No drugs or alcohol were found in her system. She was wearing a floral shirt, purple pants, a black jacket, and a ring with a blue stone. Her black shoes were one of the best leads investigators had, as that brand of shoe was only sold in New York at the time. Authorities theorized that their Jane Doe may have been someone from the East Coast who hitchhiked to California. She had potentially then been killed by someone she accepted a ride from. Despite following up on several leads, police could still not identify their victim, which in turn limited their avenues of investigation into her murder, as they could not investigate any of her known acquaintances or identify any motives to want to harm her. Decades passed with the woman remaining unidentified and her killer remaining unpunished. One of the boys who had found her grew up, joined the Huntington Beach Police Department, and retired, with the woman remaining unidentified that entire time. Eventually, the case became Orange County's oldest unsolved Jane Doe case. Authorities did not give up on identifying the woman and her killer, however, and as technology improved over the ensuing decades, they used it to generate new leads. Her fingerprints were entered into state and federal databases, and in 2011, her partial DNA profile was developed from blood on her blouse and entered into the combined DNA index system. In 2016, images of her body as well as pictures of her ring and shoes were released to the public in a renewed effort to locate someone who could identify her. In 2001, her clothes and rape kit had been processed and a male DNA sample was identified. There was no match to it in any criminal database, however. The cigarette butt found near the body was examined in hopes of finding DNA in 2010. A male DNA profile, consistent with the one identified in 2001 from the rape kit and clothes, was developed from it, but authorities still could not identify the man whose DNA it was. In 2010, homicide detective Pat Ellis began working on the case with his partner, Mark Riley. He remained working on the case until his retirement in January 2020. Jane Doe's body had been exhumed in 2019, but testing was unable to provide a full DNA sample. She was buried in an unmarked grave in Newport Beach rather than in a potter's grave in hopes that technology would one day advance even more and it would be easier to exhume her again for further testing. One of the last things Detective Ellis did before retiring was order new testing of Jane Doe's clothes. This retesting did finally result in a complete DNA profile of Jane Doe. Now that they had a complete DNA profile, investigators turned to genetic genealogy as a potential means of finally identifying Jane Doe. In July of 2020, 52 years after the murder, authorities announced that by using genetic genealogy, they had identified both their Jane Doe and her presumed killer. Jane Doe was Anita Louise Padot, who had been 26 at the time of her death. One of 7 children, she had moved to California from Maine in 1967 because of a fascination with the film industry. She remained in contact with her family through letters, which had abruptly stopped coming after February of 1968. Her family was concerned about the sudden lack of communication from Anita, but one of her final letters stated that she would be coming back to Maine that May. When May came and went without her returning home, they truly began to worry. Her parents and siblings did not have the means to travel to California, but they remained in contact with authorities in the state trying to find Anita. By 1980, Anita's niece, Lori Curian, had also become involved in the search. She maintained regular contact with police in Whittier, where Anita had been renting a room and had posted her final letter, and the Social Security Administration in hopes of finding her. Anita's parents, as well as 3 of her siblings, passed away before she was, but her surviving 2 sisters and brother were relieved to finally know what became of Anita. The man whose DNA was found at the scene was also identified as Johnny Crisco. Crisco could not be arrested for the crime because he passed away in 2015. He died of throat cancer at the age of 71 in Washington state. Crisco's criminal history began when he was just 17. He had then joined the Army and become a paratrooper. He was discharged from the Army after 3 years when he failed a psychological examination. During the exam, he was diagnosed with positive aggressive reaction, or having a pattern of being quick to anger, easy to feel unjustly treated, chronically resentful, immature, and impulsive, according to investigators. Crisco was arrested in 1971, but his record was subsequently purged. He married 3 times and had 2 children. Both of his children and one of his ex-wives have passed away. Following his death, his body went unclaimed. Authorities are still unsure of how Crisco and Anita came into contact or if they were in any way previously connected before the day of the murder. They are asking anyone who may be able to provide such information to call the Huntington Beach Police tip line. Anita's body was returned to her family in Maine. They held a private service for her, with some of the investigators from California in attendance. Anita was buried in Waterville, Maine. While they will never see Anita's killer brought to justice, the remaining members of her family are relieved to have finally found answers and been given the opportunity to lay Anita to rest. It is a big weight lifted off. She is not missing anymore, said Anita's niece, Lori. She is close to us now. We have a sense of peace that comes with that.